Hey everyone, I'm Josh with PDQ.com, here to show you the new PDQ Link. We've got a lot to get covered today, so let's go ahead and jump right in. Alright, so the quick setup today is we've got a couple machines we'll be working on. The first one here is called 000 Laptop out of office. It's our offline machine. We've got connectivity to it through another application, but we want to make sure that deploying inventory can talk to it, and we want to make sure that it can talk to everything inside the network beside that. The other machine that we've got is our Link server. So what we're going to go ahead and do is run through the setup. The first thing you'll see is the EULA and the requirements page. So our requirements are a Windows Server 2012 R2 or newer, Windows PowerShell installed 5.1 or higher, and port 443 forwarded to this machine. Whether you put that in a DMZ, whether you port forward it, whether you expose it directly, it's really up to you. The other consideration is that it's got to be AD joined. The reason we got to have it AD joined is all of the access control to this PDQ Link is through Active Directory. So if it's not an AD joined server, you're not going to be able to do that. So the first thing we do is we're going to run through the prerequisite. We're going to bounce through. We're going to make sure all of those things are there. The other thing we're going to check is that we can make sure that we can install the remote access module, as well as that if it's already there, it's not configured. If it is there and configured, we're going to throw a warning. You are able to overwrite anything that's already here, but it will overwrite it. So just keep that in mind that you can ruin some stuff you already have configured, which is another reason you may want to spin this up on a dedicated server or something that you know doesn't have these roles. The next is the configuration page, and this is only one page, so we only have to ask you for a few bits of information. The first one is how are we going to give IP addresses to our connected clients? My preferred way is just to use DHCP. I've already got a DHCP server on this network, so I'm just going to forward those DHCP requests through the tunnel. You have the option of specifying IP addresses. This is where it gets a little more complicated. You can say use this range to this range. Just make sure that the IP addresses you specify are routable. The next one is a certificate. Because we use SSTP as the encryption method here, we have to have a cert on both ends. The installer will generate a cert for you, or you can bring your own. If you bring your own, make sure the subject alternate names match the host name of this server, or you use a wildcard. Either way. For this one, we're going to use our own password, and we're just going to make a self-signed cert. The cert that we do make is RSA 2048, and it's valid for 10 years. The next one is the VPN group. Remember how we talked about AD controls all of the authentication? This is the AD group of users, not computers, that are able to connect to the VPN server. So I went ahead and I made one called VPN users, threw a couple users in there, and then selected it here. The last little bit is this client configuration. Up to this point, we've been defining things server-side. Now we're going to define things client-side. So the first thing we need to do is define what do we want the name to show up as on the client machines. We're just going to leave it default as the link connection, and then we have to give the server host name. This is the public host name, not the internal machine host name. This is stuff that's publicly resolvable. In our case, we're linkwebcast.pdq.com. One thing I want to call out here, you can use an IP address. It will work. There's a downside to that. If for some reason you switch ISPs, you move offices, and you don't keep your IP addresses, the certificate, if you make a self-signed cert, is going to be off of that name and not the IP, so you're going to have to get a new cert and make sure that cert's everywhere. So next is the actual installation. This is going to say all of the things it's going to do, so we're going to go ahead and hit install. Just like the installer says, this can take a while. We've got to install the remote access and server and network policy server roles. Then we have to configure them and then generate our client installer. And then we're going to do a port check.
Hey, Josh, I got a question. Back to the server name. You said it is an external server name. Mm-hmm. It needs to be so, kind of like www.google.com resolves externally. So it needs to be able to be resolved by the remote machine.
Yeah.
Where would you get that? So where would you set that kind of a thing up?
So in our case, who holds the PDQ.com zone is Cloudflare. So I went to our Cloudflare DNS panel and I said, all right, this is the public IP, and I'm going to say, oh, this morning, Link Webcast sounds great. and then it resolved.
Okay, so that's how you do that. Is
Yep.
there any other places? I mean, your ISP would be a place to look for
Your
that.
ISP could do it. Another place might be who's some big ones like DNS Made Easy.
Okay.
I think does a lot. GoDaddy.
So you could just DNS name lookup and come up with some places that you could actually go register that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. Exactly. The other thing I want to call out during this install is because we're installing these networking roles and configuring them, there are some service restarts. So you'll notice here I am in remote desktop. There is a good chance that we're going to lose connectivity. And it's going to lose connectivity when it bounces those services and will come right back. So unless you have console access to the machine you're going to install this on, be aware that could happen. It's normal. Don't worry about it.
Not to worry. I love that.
Yep.
I was wondering, I always, security-wise,
Yeah.
two-factor authentication. Can it do it? Can we do it?
Yeah, actually, we've got this question a lot in support and other questions. So remember how we talked about AD is controlling all the auth here? Link itself isn't doing that authentication layer, so there's no way to plug multi-factor authentication into Link. But if you have multi-factor authentication in your Active Directory logins, Link is going to follow suit.
Okay, so make sure your two-factor authentication is set up at the AD level.
Yep, because your user logs in, Link connects with those user credentials, and it's like, oh, new AD user login, and then it has to follow your policy for that.
Very cool.
Bouncing back to the installation, it looks like we've got the roles installed. So now we're just dumping through all the configuration.
Excellent.
Yeah, do we have some other questions, like rather than just staring at the blank screen? Let's run through them.
Oh, there's one or two.
Okay.
Actually, if you want the honest truth, I think we've set a record for submitted questions today.
Good heavens, I just looked. Wow.
Yes, it's impressive. Dear Josh, how is this product different than an always-on VPN? Is there a reason to use another VPN in conjunction with PDQ Link? Sincerely, Erik P.
Hey, Erik. It's different from an always-on VPN in the regard that the user right now with PDQ Link can go in and can disconnect the VPN. Once the user initiates the disconnect, the VPN will be off until reboot. Now, if there's like network connectivity issues or the machine reboots, then Link will continue to try and reconnect. So that's the difference there.
So if somebody's got a VPN set up, currently they're connecting, and this is just another option for them.
Sure.
Okay.
Exactly. Like, let's say you use a VPN provider and you have to buy licenses for all of your licensed users. So you are kind of stingy with those. You don't want to give them out. Well, this where you're not going to license per user. As long as you've got like the AD CALs, then they can go ahead and use this and still get access into your network, and you can manage out.
Nice.
And I think this was actually a pretty fast install. We did give this VM some extra resources this morning.
Yeah, you kind of flew by. I was expecting, you said 5 to 8 minutes, so we were going to take 5 to 8 minutes of questions. We took one.
I thought so too. We can take another one because that was actually, this is it for Link. Like now we've got our client installer and everything. So why don't we take another question?
All right. Dear Josh, does the Link agent work or on the workstation work if the remote computer is not logged on with an AD user account? Thanks, T-Law.
Hey, unfortunately, it's not. The Link agent's not going to work there because it's AD auth the whole way through, and it's going to use that logged in user context to make that VPN connection.
Isn't that a good thing? I mean, it's kind of secure at that point, right?
Yeah, here's kind of the longer answer to that question. So Link is leveraging two server roles, remote access and network policy server. The Link agent or client is expecting things to be a certain way. But the cool thing about Link is it gives you a starting point. If you want to go more complex, it's just a starting point. Go ahead and configure RAS and NPS to your heart's content. In that manner, there is an option in those where you can have an AD user authenticate on a non-AD joined machine. It's just a little more complex, so you can use Link as a starting point and then kind of dive into those server roles. They can be really complex, but with a lot of complexity comes a lot of power. So we'll go ahead and keep going. So we have no errors. It says where it saved out that pre-signed or that pre-made cert for us, as well as our client installer. By default, it's going to save it from where we executed. the installation from, so I just had it on the desktop here. But we can also save it off somewhere else. And then it's got us like our connection name and then the self-sign cert. So when we hit exit, we're ready to go. So what we need to do is we need to take our client setup here, and we're going to get it onto our remote machine. So here I've got a connection to our OOO laptop, our out of office laptop. And I'm going to send it some files. We're going to send it this client setup. And while it's doing that, do we want to take another question? Because this might take a few minutes as well.
Hey Josh, is there the option now, or will there be the option in the future to enable any sort of two-factor authentication? Thanks, Fred.
So long as you've got that two-factor on your AD logins, then yes. What happens with Link itself in the future? That's kind of an unknown at this point. So maybe we can implement an auth layer there, but I wouldn't bank on it. All right, so now that we've got our client installer, we're over here on our laptop. All right, so let's go ahead and run our client installer. This has all the pre-configured server settings for us. So we'll run it here. I'm going to run through our EULA and install our Link client. Again, this can take some time, and this has a silent install that we can show if you want to use deploy to get this out here. All right, so now we're finished. And there was our first auto connect, and we are connected to our server. So let's bounce back to inventory. We've got our out of office laptop. Let's run a heartbeat and see if we can see him.
Now you're kicking off the heartbeat. Boom. We're gonna go find it.
Yep.
It's gonna. How long does that usually take? I mean, is that just based off your heartbeat section? You know,
Yeah.
It's like 300 seconds, whatever.
Yeah,
it
I think
is.
300 seconds is the default. If you've increased it or decreased it, it's based on that. I ran a manual one here, and a heartbeat is just an ICMP. It's just a ping, like, are you online? So now I've got our laptop online. It was auto-connected, and that was it.
Hey, and just so there's no, we're not doing any network trickery here. That client you're using is not a VPN client. It's ConnectWise, right?
Yeah, this is a ConnectWise. It's their Screen Connect product. So it does have a little agent that runs in the background and lets me do VNC type stuff like this. So this is the one case in that the user can disconnect, right? Is if they manually hit this disconnect button, it will stay disconnected until the next time that they either log in or it restarts.
Does that show up every time?
It does not. It actually runs down here as this little tray icon. So it's hidden down there in the bottom.
Nice.
So we've got our machine that's now on the network. I can manage out. I can manage in. They can connect to anything that's on this network. And it took us, what, 14 minutes?
Not bad.
From start to end.
That's pretty quick.
That's pretty damn quick.
Yeah.
PDQ.
So, pretty damn nice.
Yeah, you see what I did there?
That's what our company stands for?
So I kicked off a scan just to show I'm not, hiding anything funny with, creating A records and stuff like that.
You know that client install. Mm-hmm. Let's say we get everybody in the office. They hit the network. We can build. Obviously, we're PDQ. You can build a package there.
Absolutely. Yeah. Let's bounce over to deploy. So I actually pre-staged this. I was anticipating that client installer that server installer would take a little bit longer. So I went pre-staged this. But it's really easy. It's just /QN.
Whoa, time out. We made something easy to deploy.
I know. I think we thought this one through a little bit.
That's pretty damn cool.
Yep. Well, there it is. So here's our installer file, /QN. You can push that out to your machines that are on the VPN you have now. Maybe if they're rotating through the office, things like that. But a package is really only kind of half the equation. What about if I wanted to know if they have it or not? Right? So if I bounce over here in my collection, it's pretty easy. Its application name contains PDQ Link client. It'll show me all the machines that have it. If you want to get into versioning and other logic there, go ahead and do that. And then we've got our not installed, which follows the same. All not any application name is just the inverse. So now that we scanned our laptop that we used for this, we'll show that it's out of office, and we can find its applications. And here's our PDQ Link client.
Sweet.
Yeah. So that's PDQ Link in a nutshell.
I got a question. I mean, that went very smooth, very seamless, very quick. Do you guys run into, have there been a lot of speed bumps along the way, things that people might see?
There's a couple things that you might see along the way. One of them is if you've got server roles that are in like a pending restart status, like if I run through the installer back on my Link demo and I've got some stuff that's pending restart, maybe it's got some updates, in that prerequisite check, it might throw some errors. Or on the installation, it might throw some errors. You have to restart and rerun that installer.
So just a rule of thumb, restart the server before you do this and should take care of any of that?
Yeah, the other thing is, let's say that you've ran through this installer and you want to make changes in the future, right? Or I just goofed up, I was trying this out because I didn't want to roll this out to production, but I like it. I want to change it. Well, that's where we can rerun the setup again. So in the beginning when I said hey, if you have these roles configured, we'll overwrite them. So if I run this setup again now, we'll run through the prerequisite check. We should pass all of them, except for now we're going to get some warnings because we've gone through and we've installed these already. And it says, hey, you already have all of these settings configured. We can go ahead and overwrite them again or just back out. So if we hit ignore, be like, all right, you've chosen to ignore. Go ahead at your own risk because we're going to let you do whatever you want. And then I can reconfigure everything here again. So if I need to regenerate a new certificate, a new client-side installer.
Does it generate a new cert every time you do the install?
If I say make one for me.
Okay.
But the first time we did this, we said, hey, we saved out our cert. And we saved it over here. So we now have that certificate. We have the password we set. So if we just need to make simple modifications, we can.
Cool.
Yeah. Do we have some other questions about Link?
One or two,
right.
Maybe. Here's another two-factor authentication question. Two-factor authentication is supported for AD, but what about with Azure and conditional access policies? Sincerely, Jeff W.
Ooh, Jeff, I actually don't know if we've tested that, and I don't know. So I've got to drink to that one.
Got plenty there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do I configure DHCP if I'm running it from another server? Daniel W.
All right, Daniel. You shouldn't need to actually do anything. So the Link configuration should actually go out on your network and figure out where that DHCP broadcasts. It'll do a DHCP broadcast, figure out who responds, and then configure that server. So Link does not need to be installed on the same server that is running DHCP. Mine is not. The only roles and features now on this server are remote access and NPS. So that's how that would work.
Do you think it's a good idea to have it on its own server?
I do. I think it makes it a little easier to harden from a security perspective if that's something that you're really concerned about. You're likely not putting a DHCP server out in your DMZ.
Yeah.
This Link server is probably the most simple of configuration. It's a single NIC. You can get into multi-NIC setups with RAS, and then you can get into NPS and configure that to your heart's content. My favorite thing about Link is this is just a starting point. These two server roles can get really complicated really quickly. So it's really nice to have something that's going to do just the basic, get you connectivity, keep you auto-connected, and then let you get in there and do more if you want.
Dear Josh, this is actually a similar question, but do I need to make any changes to my DNS or DHCP setup to use PDQ Link? This came from the support queue.
Oh, the answer is no. That's actually one of my favorite things about Link is if you're using other VPN providers, you typically have to worry about things like DHCP relays, or I want to make sure that DNS updates are happening. Because this is yet another Active Directory integrated role, and if you're using Active Directory integrated DNS, they're going to be best friends. It's like they're going to be right in the office. All of those scavenging rules that we've talked about for a long time in Happy Healthy DNS, they're now exactly the same. There's no more considerations that you need to make because of you've got these other VPN clients. It's like they're in your office. We've really just extended the Active Directory and Microsoft Network out with their own tools So everybody plays nice on the same playground.
Hey Josh, just saw that Microsoft released a critical patch, KB nerd blah, to fix a flaw in Windows Server 2012 R2 yesterday that's making some news that is specific to RAS. Is it possible that this could interfere with the PDQ Link setup process since it is based on RAS? Jeff P.
Hey Jeff, so I actually dug into that patch, and it's looking like they're fixing a couple CVEs in there for either remote code execution or privilege escalation. Keep in mind, RAS is used in not only direct access, but Microsoft's flagship always-on VPN. They're just complex, so it's a really kind of it's a attack surface that might draw a lot of attention. So it does get a lot of attention from Microsoft on the patching side. That's a good thing. Microsoft is always looking at this because you are allowing connections into your network. It is secure. So if those type of KBs are going to come out quite frequently, and they should be applied.
Dear Josh, are there any plans to make the client load in a minimized state and have the ability to lock it down so users cannot disconnect? Sincerely, Pete.
Hey Pete, the first time is the only time that it's going to kind of pop up in the GUI there for you. As far as I know, just to kind of show you that it's there. From that point forward, it should run in the background. I don't know the exact plans for what's going to happen with Link. We've made the decision to allow clients to disconnect, but you can change it. You actually don't even need that Link client because it's just RAS. You could build your own configuration on the target machines and define your own settings there.
Similar question, is there a way to auto reconnect and remove the user's ability to disconnect the VPN? That's from Ben S.
Ben, along the same lines, not right now, but it could be something we do in the future.
So Chris J just slacked me. See Chris. Yeah. And he is saying that it may pop up on every start. Does that mean each new sign-in? Like, so if you have a new user?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know if he means like off of the restart or off of the reconnect. I guess those are two different questions. Is it the new user login, or is it if there's network connectivity that gets interrupted and reconnected? I don't know what Chris is referring to right there.
He's saying that it's a bug. So whatever it is, we may fix it.
Either way.
We'll probably fix it.
Okay, well, there's that.
Hey Josh, I work at a school. If we put this on student computers that are at home, is there a way to block access to everything else on the network but allow us to patch their computers from PDQ deploy? Thanks, Charles T.
Hey Charles, this was where that network policy server is about to be your best friend. As much as you can think about it and as much as like the scenarios you can think of, you can get in there and you can make those changes. You could lock it down to where you say only SMB traffic from this to this is allowed. On the inverse, another question we get in, we've gotten into support a little bit, is by default, links, the VPN tunnel it sets up is split tunneled. What that means is it'll build a list of routes on the client machine and say, okay, anything destined to my inbound network, I'll put over the VPN adapter. Anything that's not, I'll use the default route that I know of, and it's typically out through, the WAN interface. There's been a lot of requests to say, how do I disable this? There's actually a knowledge base article on how to do this. The Link client itself won't do it, but it can be done as a post step or even a secondary step in the installer. So this client setup here will go ahead and it will set it up for split tunnel. But let's say for some reason you don't want that. Maybe you need all of your traffic routed through a proxy, something like that. In your next PowerShell step, you can go find that KB. I don't remember what it is off of the top of my head, but then you can grab that VPN profile that was created, modify it so that split tunneling is off, and then all of the traffic, once connected, goes through your network.
Hey Josh, how many clients can be connected at once? And this one comes out of our support queue.
Yep. So this is governed by SSTP ports. if I can, I'll see if I can get this open while I'm talking. It's governed by SSTP ports. So that's how many different connections can come in. So the link server setup will set this to 200 out of the box. We realize this is maybe not ideal for everyone, but again, there's a knowledge base article there on how to change this. You can modify how many ports are allowed to come in. So, here we've got all of these inactive ports, and here's our one active RAS routing port, and that's off of our one connected laptop here. What would happen in the case that these get full, it would start not allowing additional connections. So if you run into that situation where you've got more than 200 clients connecting and that 201st just won't, this is why. It's a quick change and then a restart of the services, and then you're back in business.
It's a question in regards to that. Is there a sweet spot? I mean, after I hit 400, do I need to spin up another server and point people at that? I mean, I know that's kind of a loaded question, but...
It's a super loaded question. It really depends on the load, right? It shouldn't be using that much on like compute and RAM, but let's say that my RAS server only has a 1 gig link. If all of a sudden I've got 500 computers coming in and I've disabled split tunneling for some reason, now I've got 500 client machines sending all of their traffic from whatever network they're on to my link server and then into my network.
Okay, so that's the biggest consideration is what's the pipe look like on the back end?
Exactly.
And how's it's configured?
Yep, and then how much of that network policy are you putting into place to govern that connection coming in and out? So.
And a couple more from our support queue. Hey Josh, what does it do if it tries to connect while a computer is already in the office?
That's a great question. I'll actually show you here. So if we go to our out of office machine and we look at the routing table, right? Just route print. We'll see that some of these routes have been built by PDQ Link. And you'll notice a metric. Because it is a VPN interface, it's weighted differently than something that is on link. On link has a higher priority. It's less cost. It's faster to use it. So if this machine comes into our network now, sure, link might connect, but its route metric is going to be weighted such that the on-link is always preferred. So it's okay even if it does connect.
And you may have already answered this, but how will this work if I have an existing VPN?
It will work the same. You could get into a kind of a weird scenario if you've got specific routes built or specific policy that applies for this and not the other. It really depends on your unique situation.
And a similar question, what do I have to do if I already use a VPN and just want my clients to be up to date, even without signing in with the other VPN client?
Well, I guess that's exactly what this does. So long as it's there, your users don't have to take any additional action. They just log in and link auto connects, and we'll try and maintain that connection so that you'll be able to manage them.
So I can run regular VPN and link at the same time?
Sure.
Okay.
Sure. There's going to be some edge cases where you might have to, think about routing or access control. It's going to depend.
So I can mix and match, but let me ask you this. My laptop has a VPN client and link on it.
Yep.
I can use them both?
Use them both.
Link's going to try and auto-load?
Yeah, link's going to keep in the background. Your VPN client may or may not. Where the traffic is actually going to flow is based on that routing table. So maybe connect one of your test machines, do a route print, look at those metrics, figure out where traffic is going to prefer to go based on the route weight. That can be adjusted as well. If you want those weights different, you can modify those weights. You can modify the metrics. You can add routes. You can remove routes. Because once you're split tunneled, all of the decisions that happen on that client side.
So that's in the mystical networky stuff.
Oh yeah.
Setup.
Yeah, you're in there a little bit. Now, but if you go and you disable split tunneling, then it doesn't matter because all of your traffic is going to go to that RAS server. Always.
Good to know.
Hey Josh, will it be possible to use a different port than 443 security, and if port is already used? Sincerely, Marcel.
Hey Marcel. SSTP unfortunately, is 443 only. So that's not a decision that we made. That's a decision that Microsoft has determined for that protocol. RAS does allow for some other authentication and encryption algorithms, but we chose SSTP because of its ease of use.
Hey, Josh, a good question about that 443 port forward rule. How about reverse proxy? That should work, right? Thanks, Max C.
Yes, Max, absolutely. The reverse proxy will work so long as that 443 traffic makes it internally and that your authentication, AD authentication requests are also allowed through that reverse proxy. That might actually be one of the better ways to deploy this.
Dear Josh, is it possible to apply Link to machine accounts so we can get pre-login patch capabilities? Thanks, Ryan B.
Hey, Ryan, as far as I know, that is possible. And that's within these server roles, and then you're starting to kind of dance in the territory of either direct access, which is kind of being sunset, and Microsoft Always On VPN. Things get a little more complicated in that sense. So not right now with Link.
Dear Josh, how about mom and dad companies with 5 to 10 people without a server, but a workstation used as a server? Marcel and Marcel L.
Hey guys, the hardware behind it is up to you, but it's got to be that server OS, and it's got to be 2012 R2 or higher. Sorry.
Hey Josh, what about, I'm just going to say, configuration for this product. What about load balancing? Christopher G.
Christopher, this is possible with routing and remote access. There is a clustering capability there. What you could do is you could use Link to get both of your servers set up most of the way, but then on that actual clustering and high availability, that's going to be on you and your unique needs.
Dearest Josh, can we control what resources, IP addresses, and ports that a remote computer has access to in the local network?
Yep, absolutely. That network policy server allows you to do all kinds of fun things. You can define pretty much anything that you want. It works similarly to group policy. It's very Microsoft driven. If you're a Windows Server admin, you're going to be very comfortable here in the network policy server defining policies and everything you want.
Hey Josh, can we set it up so it can only manage devices and use PDQ deploy and inventory with remote devices? Nikki M.
Nikki, so once just the default settings, once it's connected, as far as deploying inventory are concerned, it's just another machine on your network. And so it's not going to be able to differentiate between a Link connected device or that laptop that's just next door.
Could you scope it though in those network policies?
Yes.
I mean, I guess you could. That would take some work.
Yep. You could, and then it goes back to, are you going to use DHCP, the same DHCP server, or are you going to define your own network? And then you could scope it because you'd be like, oh, if they're a Link connected client, they're in the subnet. And then you can make your decisions based off that.
Hey Josh, does PDQ Link use IPv6 or IPv4? Will there be something in the future to allow PDQ deploy and inventory to go through a direct access connection? Sincerely, Nikki Minaj, maybe.
Hey Nikki, so both or either or one or all of them. And deploy and inventory actually work with the direct access connection right now. There is a little bit of tweaking that has to happen with that. And it's with that 6-to-4 translation that happens with direct access. That's something that you could either open a support ticket with, or I would actually just suggest looking at how it works document, the PDQ deploy KB, how it works, and also the firewall ports and exceptions. All of those things apply. You've just got a 6-to-4 Teredo tunnel in the middle now.
Dear Josh, can you set a DNS suffix so that it won't connect while on a domain network? Ben S.
I don't know. Let me think that one through. I don't think so. That might be something we'd have to try. It's a good question, Ben.
Dear Josh, will Link be free forever or just in 2020? Sincerely, Adrian P.
Hey Adrian, how about this? You can download and use this version of Link all the way through the end of 2020. and you can use this version for free in perpetuity. What happens after 2020? We don't know yet.
Dear Josh, I was piloting an always-on-device tunnel with MS built-in VPN. It works, but I have issues with DNS staying updated. Does PDQ Link have issues keeping DNS up to date? With the DNS issues I saw with Microsoft Always-On VPN, it made it somewhat cumbersome to push patches with PDQ and WSUS. Thanks in advance, Ryan B.
Hey Ryan, this is actually one of the reasons that we've kind of shrunk down the scope that is Link versus Always On VPN. And one of the reasons that I would suggest actually maybe just sticking with those DHCP relay options in the server setup. Reason being is this. If you go look at any of our keeping DNS happy and healthy, we say things like use DNS or DHCP to control those DNS updates and those DNS scavenging. If you do that and you just kind of allow Link to handle all that in the background, then it's like the machines are still just in your office and they'll follow the same updates like the machines were right next door.
Hey Josh, I'm trying to install Link on my inventory and deploy server, getting error messages at the configuration RAS portion. It's barking about the PFX having an incorrect password or membership to AD principal is protected. I tried using our GoDaddy signed wildcard cert and self-signed cert from Link. Both failed. Ryan B.
Ryan, I'm not exactly sure without seeing that error and having a whole lot more information. I don't know where to point you other than maybe the community. If you can post that to the Link community at justhelp.pdq.com with the information you can, we might be able to give you a little more help there. And there's a ton of smart people out in the community that can help as well.
Dear Josh, will a route need to be established to push WSUS packages through Link?
Hey Ryan, actually no. So we're going to build that route for you. A fun thing about routing and remote access is it follows class-based routing. So we can get into the nerd, blah, blah, blah of this, but that basic route is going to be built for you. If you've got a more complex internal network, then you might need to build some routes client-side to come inbound, but that outbound traffic should be just fine.
Hey Josh, can Link live in the cloud? Sincerely, /Q.
It can live wherever you want it to live, so long as you've got the networking to back it up. So short answer, yes, and it depends.
Dear Josh, what's the setup if we have 2 AD forests? Would we set up PDQ Link on each forest? Sincerely, Billy Z.
Hey Bill, how complex do you want to get with this? Do you want to build like a two-way trust between those two forests? Then make a forest security group and call it that. It's up to you. What we did in some testing here is we had a single forest with multiple domains, and we actually just made a single user group at the root of the forest, and then included users from other of the relevant domains in the forest. So that's on you to decide how you want to do that and how much of a headache you want to deal with forest trusts.
Hey Josh, if you already have a RAS server or an NPS server on your network, do you need to worry about that as long as you set up the PDQ Link server on a new separate server? Thanks, Adam N.
Hey Adam, as long as they're on different servers, we're not going to go over the network and reconfigure what you already have. So as long as you're not going to go right over the top of it, you should be just fine.
Hey Josh, how would you handle work group laptops with PDQ Link? Thanks again, Billy Z. Hey
Bill, so what you're going to need to do on those work group laptops, I'm going to assume that the users on those work group laptops have AD user logins that are in the AD security group you pointed to with Link. So what you want to do is install the Link client on a domain join machine, and then look at that VPN profile that was built. You can then take that VPN profile, put it on those workgroup computers, but then your users are also going to have to manually connect and disconnect and manually authenticate every single time, but at least they can connect to your server.
Dear Josh, is there any session or access logging with PDQ Link?
That's all going to be on your server side, and that is also up to you to configure the logging you want, whether it's in RAS or NPS, and how you want those logs aggregated. Again, we're just setting up these server roles for you. After that fact, it's up to you to kind of go the next step as far as you want to go.
Dear Josh, can PDQ Link run on the same server as PDQ Inventory and deploy someone claiming to be PDQ?
Short answer, yep, absolutely, so long as it meets the minimum requirements.
Hey Josh, do the DHCP addresses need to be routable when you set up an IP address range? Billy Z.
Hey Bill, they don't need to be when you set it up. But if you want to have that communication inbound, it needs to be done after, but the server installer isn't going to throw an error at you.
Dear Josh, we have multiple offices that have hardware VPN links. Can we have multiple link servers set up in different offices which use the same groups? We find the traffic works out better when they connect to their local office. Thanks, Chris J.
Chris, yep, you sure can. You can do that however you want to do it, and then you can control how that traffic is flowing through your network. You could do that on the network policy server. You could do that on your physical networking equipment. You could do it off of route weights on the client. There's a bunch of different ways to accomplish that goal.
So in just another thought. So I have, let's say, Site 1.
Mm-hmm.
I've got PDQ Link 1. I got Site 2, PDQ Link 2. The client installs are going to be different for each of those because they're routed back to their specific.
They're going back to their specific. Even though you may have like an IPsec tunnel between Site 1 and Site 2, that traffic might look something like client connects to Site 1, but needs to talk to something in Site 2. So first it traverses the SSTP tunnel to Site 1, and then the IPsec tunnel to Site 2.
And that's kind of a way you'd, send
Yep.
traffic, the local, stuff
Exactly.
that should be at Site 2 to Site 2 and Site 1.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of different ways to configure that. You can do that on your physical networking gear. You could do it on route weights. It's a kind of a choose your own adventure book on that one.
Dear Josh, will each client have their own unique cert, or will they be using the same wildcard self-signed cert? Thanks, Jay.
I'm glad you asked this question because I didn't cover it. They will be using the same. If you look in the link client setup, if you extract this, I don't have summons up here. If you extract this, you'll actually see that same self-signed cert that's in that so that it can be installed on the client machine. So they are the same.
Dear Josh, so essentially if you already have Cisco AnyConnect licenses, what does this offer? Ryan E.
Ryan, that's up to you. Do you want to keep paying for AnyConnect licenses? Do you want to buy more? Do you want to just pay for user CALs instead? What does that AnyConnect give you that this doesn't? That's up to you. Why not both?
Dear Josh, how does the client handle certificate renewals? Does it do a full cert chain check? So if we're using a public cert, it's all good to go? If you're using self-signed, do you need to deploy a new client package when updating? Thanks, Cameron G.
Cameron, it works just like any other cert renewal. If it's self-signed and you hit that 10-year, if your server's still around in a decade, then you've got to regenerate that cert and put that cert back on that other machine. If you're using a public cert, it's going to follow the same cert authority chain there. So as long as the intermediaries are included, and the root authorities are there, you're fine.
Not sure if we've already answered this one, but dear Josh, we already have a standalone server running PDQ Deploy and PDQ Inventory. Is it recommended or advised to run PDQ Link on the same server? Thanks, Lizelle.
My personal recommendation is to run this on its own server. That's not to say you can't put this on your deploy and inventory server. If it meets the specs, then it will run there. My personal opinion from a security standpoint, you want this on its own machine so you can control the traffic that is coming from an untrusted network, the internet, into your network with the very limited scope.
Hey Josh, if someone chooses to install this on their PDQ inventory deploy server for 200 computers, how much additional resources should be allocated to the server for Link? Chris L.
Chris, I actually wouldn't give it any more resources right off the bat. I would actually just run it as is and see what happens. There's a little more overhead because you've got some encryption happening, but not a ton.
Josh, have you guys tested this in conjunction with Network Policy Server extension for Azure to allow MFA?
Anthony, we have not, but we should take a note and look at that. Thanks.
Dear Josh, may want to point out, if you create a new install, you want to use the existing cert. Otherwise, your clients will fail the connection in NPS when their certs are the old cert. Prevent gnashing of teeth. Ben S.
Ben, that's a great point. Yep, you've got certs that are failing. It'll log both on the client and server side of an invalid cert or a cert mismatch or something like that. So yep, prevent that wailing and gnashing of teeth for sure.
Hey Josh, any configuration options for the client, such as disabling tray on icon, disallowing the disconnect option, setting retry interval, etc.? Thanks, Cameron G.
Hey Cameron, nothing yet. Keep in mind this is the first release of this product. Who knows what the future holds?
Does the VPN connection show up in the Windows VPN settings? What happens if the user tries to connect from there instead of the PDQ Link GUI? Anthony R.
Hey Anthony, it will show up there, and if they connect there, it will connect. If they disconnect there, it'll disconnect in the GUI. The GUI is just an easy way to see what's going on at a glance.
Dear Josh, when I installed it last night, it killed WSC SVC, and I can't get it back. This ultimately caused my AV software to not start. Anyone else have this issue? I'm on Server 2019 Data Center.
I've not seen that or heard of it, and I believe that the server I'm on right now, I think, is actually that exact version. So, no idea on that one. That's probably another one to go to the community where you can post some event logs and get some more information there.
Dear Josh, how do you specify which VLAN for DHCP to hand out? Thanks, Ben S.
Ben, I don't really quite know how to answer that question without a little more information there. If you're just using a single NIC RAS server for link, whatever VLAN that RAS server and that link server is on will be the VLAN in which DHCP is relayed.
Hey Josh, can we install the server part of PDQ Link on Windows Server Core, i.e. no GUI? Thanks, Max C.
Max, I don't know that we tested that, and I don't know the requirements for RAS and NPS, and if they're core compliant, I'm not sure.
Dear Josh, what are your favorite things about Link? That it's just a starting point? That you don't need to make changes to DNS and DHCP, etc.? Sincerely, Ray C.
Hey, Ray, my favorite part about Link is in the matter of about, 15 minutes, I had a server, it was stood up, I had a client, I could go install it somewhere, and I could have connectivity. It was really quick, really easy, simple to set up, and then if I want to get really complex, I can. And then I can layer in that complexity, and then this RAS NPS configuration isn't such a monster. It's not such, you take a bite of an elephant one bite at a time.
Dear Josh, what is the essence of the difference between PDQ Link and simply setting up NPS and Remote Access manually and using the built-in Windows VPN client? Sincerely, Antonio R.
The difference is it took me 14 minutes to do it with Link and get most of the configuration done versus having to go figure out everything that I needed to do with RAS and NPS. And then I got a client-side installer that was pre-bundled with the cert at the end for SSTP.
Hey Josh, if we have a VPN handling DHCP with 24-hour leases, will that mess up Link at all? DNS on each machine is still checking back to the same DNS DHCP server, but the actual lease per machine is being brokered from the VPN appliance. Thanks, RD.
You're going to end up with probably multiple A records in that case. If you've got a VPN appliance that's issuing stuff in, subnet A, and your advisors are still registering to their DNS zone with their A record, and then you've got Link there, and they're giving it from subnet B. So what's going to happen is you're going to have multiple records with different IPs for the same device. To kind of mitigate that and deploy an inventory, if you want, if I can remember where it is. Where is it at? There's the test multiple names and address resolution here in performance. And then it's been combined. So it's in preferences deployments. So,
Dear Josh, sorry, I missed much of this. Could this be used to update AD user passwords on devices that were taken home? Thanks, Ian W.
Hey Ian, so long as they're not expired the first time they connect. If they're already expired and the user is using that password, it'll pass that authentication request along, and it'll be an expired password. Now, if I'm just doing routine password changes, so long as you're connected, yeah, go ahead and change passwords.
Hey Josh, firewall considerations. Other than port 443 forwarding, is there anything we need to open up in our NG firewall? We use Untangle. Thanks, Anomi.
I'm not super familiar with Untangle. It depends on how in-depth you're getting with that next-gen firewall. Are you doing packet inspection? Are you getting into all kinds of other things, like looking at the different types of traffic? Once 443 is open, the tunnel is there. Now, depending on how in-depth you're getting into inspecting traffic there, you might have to do some more.
Dear Josh, is there any issue with running Link on a virtual server, clustered or non-clustered? Matt M.
Matt, I would suggest it. I am a huge proponent of physical servers make me cringe.
Hey Josh, we use a Sonic Wall firewall to handle DHCP. Will Link be able to pass DHCP to the firewall, or does it only work with MS Server DHCP? James B.
James, I'm not entirely sure. I would suggest give it a shot. If it doesn't work, you can always go back and rerun that installer just like we did and change it to a different IP scope.
Hey Josh, if I don't have any expertise with DMZ stuffs, how dangerous is it for me to try to set this up on my own? Do I need to get a network guru to configure that beforehand? Andrew S.
Hey Andrew, depends on how complex you want to go. Like if you want to do something like a reverse proxy, get this in the DMZ, one leg in, one leg out, you might want to find a network person. If you want just a simple port 443 forward, that's pretty easy on most firewalls. You typically involve setting up a virtual IP that's going to map a public IP to a private IP, and then you have to set up the policy around it. So requests come to this public IP. I want you to allow 443 to this internal IP. It's a little tiny pinhole that's just specifically that traffic to that one server, and you're not exposing anything else.
Dear Josh, can the client be run from anything other than Windows? Mac, iPad, Android, etc.? Thanks. Picamus.
Short answer, no. Sorry.
Hey Josh, for DHCP, sounds like we want to forward requests to the server from the firewall on a separate NIC that's on the VLAN you want the computer to use that connect via link. So VPN computers don't get an IP in a server VLAN. Ben S.
Ben, I'm just going to say yes. That sounds good. Without seeing a network map, I'm having a hard time answering that question for you. Sorry.
And our final two questions. Is it possible to configure the client only if I already have an RAS VPN setup?
There's not, as far as I know. If you already have an RAS setup, what you might want to do is look at the PowerShell options for building Windows VPN connections. Everything's going to be there. It's not going to be as clean as elegant as a single executable, but at least you could script it so you're not having to build those by yourself.
Hey Josh, is there a future plan for PDQ deploy and inventory to be web-based? I would like to be able to use it on my MacBook.
Short answer, I don't know. It kind of depends. We'll see what the future brings.
And we've got one final question. Dear Josh, when we install PDQ Link, we can only see computers on 192.168.nerd, but not 192.168.blah. What are we missing, or where can we configure this routing? Pete V.
So Pete, I'm going to assume that you are in the de facto split tunnel. So remember when we talked about that RAS off of just out of the box uses class-based routing? It's going to assume that your 192.168. whatever network has a net mask of 255.255.255, a /24. So that's why you're not seeing those other ones. So what you're going to need to do if you still want to stay split tunneled is after Link is installed and that connection is there, add those routes. Add the proper routes with the correct subnet mask, and use vSLAM. So, all right, everybody. thanks for your time today, and thanks for your questions with PDQ Link. Hopefully this helped out.
Thanks for joining our webcast today. Congratulations, Pete V. and looks like Ben S. Winners of PDQ swag. Please send us your info at webcast@pdq.com. Thanks again for joining us. Stay safe, and we'll see you back here next week.